Now, Attack on Titan Season 3 Part 2 is a good season on its own, but when we look at the previous seasons, then it's mediocre at best. This season has a basic premise and it's pretty much hard to get something simple wrong. The writing does get a few things wrong that I'll definitely hold it accountable for, because, it's a simple and basic premise. Anyways, the plot is simple. The scouts head to Shingashina to uncover the big secrets, but surprisingly, their path gets intercepted by the enemy they had prepared for. So they battle them and finally uncover the secrets, and we get some extra details on the world. First of all, the art style is quite solid and a major improvement from the previous season, and I didn't even think about it, but the animation is splendid, which is surprising considering that the last season was pretty good. Also, CGI was introduced and I've never been a fan of it, and in fact I quite much hated it, but I guess it'd be pretty difficult to animate the Colossal Titan, so I can't bust their balls for that. A good thing about Attack on Titans I noticed is that Titans here are big and threatening. What I mean is that for the most part they're slow and that increases the tension. Like unlike the new Godzilla movies where Kong and them are like regular humans despite being huge, Attack on Titan is like the original Godzilla and he has a certain gravity. And I think that's just awesome. Now, as for the plot, as I said, it's simple and there's a few shortcomings, but it's solid. Now, I'm no perfectionist, mind you, and I'm willing to look over a few things, so no problem there. Now, my first issue is with the narrative. It is all over the place, going back and forth, and more often than not, things come across as forced, which do affect the bigger picture, mind you. Like how Reiner was let to live because of that reason. Hanji already said that they were gonna kill him, but more time passes than a simple overlap in narrative would allow, and this happens a lot throughout the first part of the season, and it makes the plot seem less natural and, for a lack of a better word, tampered with. The multiple narratives don't work together to tell a cohesive story and leaves gaps. Now, as for the time, I got no issue there, but the pacing is off as hell and it ties into the multiple changes in the narrative that I mentioned earlier. While it's not enough to completely ruin your immersion and entertainment, it's still prevalent and a hole in the writing that will leave you with questions if you notice it. Now, the consistency is lackluster to say the least, but there's just two questions I want to ask, and this might seem like nitpicking, but bear with me here. In the previous season, when Annie got jumped and she needed about 2 minutes to heal her eyes, why is it that it took Reiner a shorter amount of time to heal half of his head and his back, or at least it felt that way? And also, the first time Eren touched a person of raw blood, he got no memories whatsoever. And then Historia and her father touched Eren again, and then he got a few selected memories. And now he touches Historia again and get more memories. And for some reason, I can't help but feel like the script only reveals certain amounts of information, and it's not the whole thing, and it's just, I don't know, wrong. And and another thing I ignored at first is Reiner's plot armor. This dude got stabbed in the neck and chest, and they later explained it by saying that he transferred his consciousness into his ball. And the height he fell from was crazy. I mean, he would have at least broken it or crushed all of his bones if he didn't die. And later in the scene that I mentioned, where he gets half of his head blown off, and I know these guys have a crazy vitality, and it takes more effort to kill them, but there should be a limit, come on. And it's this inconsistency or consistency in bullshit that's annoying. I mean, in season 1, Eren also had this form where he was covered in flames, but that just isn't brought up anymore. Anyway, something I forgot to mention in the previous video is the two sides theme. While it could have been executed better, I love the small little setup of there being two sides and the lines of right and wrong being blurred a little, which if you know the whole story, it's a good setup for things to come, and that's just fantastic. But a setup I didn't like one bit was Commander Irvin's death. While it was splendid and it appeared natural and quite creative for them to set it up in the previous season and this season, that's not how you write a death scene. And I know 99.9% of anime does this, but it's ultimately wrong. Also, on a side note, I don't like comparing things, but I finally watched JJK, and Nanami's death was done properly, and it hit hard. There was no backstory, no nothing, and it just hit hard. Now that's a way to write a death scene. A proper and unexpected way that leaves you shocked. Now, AOT's author is a good writer who plans and does everything in accordance to writing, and is a person who's telling an important story with heavy themes like death and racism. But he still has some shortcomings, like a few executions, and he's afraid to kill off the main cast, with Irvin being a first. And the script, while serious and showcases the ugliness of choices, him choosing to save Armin instead of Irvin took away some potential the story had for a more serious and gritty story, probably where Irvin is stricken by guilt and Eren and his friends become more mature and reserved. Or maybe that's just me. But to add something to what Flock, or whatever his name is, Levi choosing to save Armin was an irrational and wrong decision that didn't have the quote-unquote whole of humanity in mind, and ultimately Someone else's dream was put above everyone else, as if the other scouts didn't have their own aspirations and friends they sacrificed for the sake of humanity. This just shows that the lives of the others could be lost just for someone else's dream, which I feel brings the power of friendship type of vibe into this. The characters don't go through much development, and again, a lot of people die, and except for the main cast, with the exception of Irvin. Now, some characters go through the whole back and forth development, meaning certain struggles are faced multiple times, which just takes something away from them. Also, I like the scene where Flock says to Eren that even though he's very cold, he's a person who believes that he's always right, which flushes out his character more and shows us where that naivete comes from. Overall, this season is simple and well crafted. There's a few shortcomings here and there, but it sets up a bigger story, and ultimately, it's alright. So it gets a 5.9 out of 10. And just in case you're wondering, I do have somewhat of a point system that I use, but it's loose and it takes enjoyment into account. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Wait, do you think you trademarked that?